The galaxy was a wound in the night. Once its constellations had burned bright and unbroken, each star a monument to the endless march of the Great Crusade. Now the light dimmed. Across the void, systems that had been vibrant bastions of human will flickered like dying embers. The long arm of the Imperium had stretched far, perhaps too far, and the shadow that followed in its wake was heavier than any could admit. Worlds whispered of rebellion, of promises not kept. The Emperor's dream, glorious, unyielding, was beginning to taste of ash. It was here, in the dying light of the galactic rim, that two figures stood together, alike in face, yet different in the chambers of the soul. They were the twins who should never have been found together, and yet fate had placed them side by side. Alpharius and Omegon, the most secretive of the Emperor's sons. Even among the Primarchs, they were enigmas. Brothers so alike in form and voice that none could tell them apart, save each other. We are told that the galaxy remembers only those who shout the loudest, yet history forgets the whispers that guide the shouts. Alpharius knew this better than any. For him, truth was not a pillar, it was a tool. For Omegon, it was something far more dangerous, a mirror in which the future could be seen, fractured and endless. Tonight, they stood before such a mirror, though it was no mere reflection. It lay half buried in the cracked surface of a dead moon, an ancient artifact of unknown origin, its surface etched with symbols older than the Imperium itself. The air around it shimmered, and when the twins touched it together, the galaxy unfolded before them. Not the galaxy as it was, but as it might be. They saw threads of possibility, each spinning toward a destiny both glorious and catastrophic. In some, the Emperor reigned eternal, his empire untouchable. In others, the Imperium burned under the weight of its own hubris. There were futures where they died forgotten, and others where their names were spoken in fear for 1,000 centuries. They watched 1,000 wars in silence, each vision a knife, each possibility a wound. And in that silence, something shifted between them. Omegon's voice was quiet, but heavy with certainty. If we do nothing, he wins, and then we lose everything. Alpharius did not answer. For him, victory was a word that had always worn a mask. He could not see the Emperor's triumph without also seeing the chains it would forge. Yet he could not see his downfall without sensing the abyss that would follow. It was the moment that would define the Alpha Legion, not through a grand proclamation, but in the private fracture of trust between two brothers who had never been apart. A fracture that would, one day, split the galaxy. And before we walk into this story, into the labyrinth of deception and loyalty, know this: we truly do love and care for you, the one listening now. You matter here in the same way every hidden piece matters in the game about to unfold. Before we begin the tale, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee and let's get started. They left the moon without another word, but both knew they had taken something from it, something they would never return. In the weeks that followed, the Alpha Legion's movements changed. Campaigns were won, not with bolter fire, but with whispers in the right ear. A bribe passed in a shadowed corner, a forged order sent at the right moment. The Emperor's enemies fell, but so too did some of his friends. Every operation was cleaner, sharper, colder. The Legion became the invisible hand of the Imperium, but one that moved according to its own will. Alpharius told himself it was still loyalty, that they were only sharpening the Emperor's blade. Omegon did not speak his thoughts aloud, but his silence was the weight between them. And far away, in the unseen places between the stars, other eyes watched. The cabal of alien minds who had waited for this moment, who knew the twins would come to them when the time was right. For now, they merely observed, letting the threads of destiny tighten. The galaxy spun on, unaware that in the dim light of a dead moon, its fate had already been sealed. The Alpha Legion's rise was not marked by fanfare or banners unfurled, but by the quiet unfolding of shadows beneath shadows. Where other legions thundered across worlds with the fire of bolters and the fury of titans, the Alpha Legion slipped in unseen. Agents hidden in plain sight, their faces ever-changing, their loyalties as fluid as the shifting tides of the warp. Alpharius and Omegon had become masters of this subtle art. The Hydra, whose many heads could strike anywhere and disappear before a whisper answered. Their strategy was no mere tactic, it was a philosophy. To defeat an enemy, one must become the enemy, know them so well that their own secrets became weapons against them. Yet beneath this cold calculation, the twins wrestled with the cost. Alpharius often found himself standing alone in the quiet moments between operations, wondering if the sacrifices they made in silence were worth the end they sought. Was the web they wove to protect the Imperium, or to ensnare it forever? The question gnawed at him, but to voice it aloud would fracture the fragile trust that held the Legion together. The Hydra was no single creature, but a brood of cells, each with its own will and reason. Among them was Callis, a lieutenant whose loyalty burned fiercely, but whose faith in their methods was beginning to waver. He had watched worlds crumble under the weight of deception, seen families torn apart by lies crafted in the name of strategy. Yet his devotion to the Legion was unshaken, because beneath the masks, Alpharius and Omegon were still his brothers. Callis's doubts found no safe harbor, however. In a Legion where secrecy was survival, suspicion was the currency of trust. When one questioned the mask questioned them in return. Alpharius noticed Callis's growing distance during briefings, the way his eyes darted to hidden corners as if seeking unseen enemies. It was a risk. The smallest crack in the armor could invite ruin. Meanwhile, Omegon drifted deeper into the shadows of the warp, communing with voices few dared acknowledge. The Cabal of Xenos minds, ancient and patient, had begun to reveal their vision of a galaxy remade, not under the Emperor's iron hand, but under a new order, born from chaos and cunning. Omegon's dreams were filled with whispers of unity through destruction, of salvation wrapped in ruin. Alpharius sensed the change, but dared not confront it. Within the heart of the Legion, the twins' bond began to fray. Their shared purpose splintered into questions neither could fully answer. Alpharius clung to the hope that the Emperor's vision could be preserved, though reshaped by their hands. Omegon embraced the possibility that true loyalty required breaking the chains of the past, even if it meant betraying the very foundation of their existence. Outside, the Great Crusade marched on, yet the Alpha Legion's battles were fought on fronts unseen by most, infiltrations that toppled entire governments without a shot fired, disinformation campaigns that turned allies into enemies overnight. Worlds fell, not to armies, but to doubt seeded in whispered rumors and forged orders. As the Hydra grew stronger, so too did the shadows it cast. Within the Legion, calls for loyalty rang hollow against the backdrop of growing suspicion. Friendships were tested in silence. Every smile could mask a dagger. And through it all, Alpharius felt the weight of command, not just over soldiers, but over a destiny that might yet consume them all. The game they played was one of infinite mirrors, where truth and lie reflected endlessly, indistinguishable from one another. To win, they would have to become ghosts, shedding their own identities until only the mask remained. But in doing so, what would remain of Alpharius and Omegon? Egon, to change. The warp is a river that flows beneath reality, invisible but shaping all that it touches. For most, it is a place of madness and peril, a sea of storms where only the strongest minds survive. For Omegon, it was a mirror of truth, a place where futures shimmered like fractured stars, and every thread of fate could be seen and perhaps pulled. Since the discovery of the ancient artifact on the dead moon, Omegon had become restless. The visions it granted were no longer distant echoes, but urgent whispers that clawed at his mind. There were paths where the Imperium shattered into ruin, where brothers turned to ashes in flames of betrayal, but also faint glimmers of salvation, if one was willing to embrace the darkness. The Cabal had returned. Silent as a ghost fleet, they arrived in the veiled stars, an obscure region where warp storms and void shadows twisted time and space. Their Xenos minds were vast and inscrutable, speaking in patterns and paradoxes, offering secrets that pierced the veil of known reality. To Omegon, they promised clarity, a way to bend the fate of the galaxy without being crushed beneath it. Alpharius did not trust them, not the Cabal, nor the visions they painted. In his eyes, the twins were meant to serve the Emperor's design, not rewrite it with alien hands. He saw the subtle shift in Omegon, the way his brother's eyes held a distant glow, as if touched by a knowledge too heavy for mortal minds. Alpharius feared what that knowledge demanded. The tension between them grew with every meeting. Alpharius would confront Omegon beneath the starlit spires of a conquered world, their words sharp as blades, but restrained by a shared history. Omegon would speak of sacrifice and renewal, Alpharius of loyalty and the cost of power. Neither would yield. Beyond their quarrels, the Alpha Legion moved as one, fractured yet united by a purpose only they fully understood. Their operations became more audacious, reaching into the heart of the Imperium's most fortified bastions. Entire planetary governors fell, not by force, but by secrets whispered into ears they trusted. The Legion was becoming a living weapon, forged from deception itself. Yet even as they sowed discord among the stars, doubt began to take root in the hearts of their own. Callis, once a steadfast lieutenant, now grappled with a gnawing question. Were they saving the Imperium or orchestrating its final symphony? His loyalty wavered as he glimpsed the cost. The lives shattered, the innocents caught in the tide of lies. Alpharius found himself confiding in Callis more often, seeking a tether to the world beyond the masks. But Omegon's visions were relentless, pulling him deeper into the Cabal's web. Each new prophecy was a thread tightening around the twins' bond, threatening to unravel the very foundation of their unity. In the depths of the warp, where time folded and space bled, Omegon whispered a vow to remake the galaxy in a crucible of fire and shadow. Alpharius answered with a silent prayer, to hold fast to the remnants of honor in a war that might leave none unscathed. The future was no longer a single path, but a tangled skein of possibilities. And in the endless night of stars, the Alpha Legion's destiny awaited, hidden in the threads of the warp, where truth was the deadliest illusion of all. The galaxy's stage was set in shadows and half-truths, where empires rose and fell, not by the clash of armies, but by the quiet turn of whispered secrets. The Alpha Legion, veiled behind layers of deception, played the puppeteer's role, guiding fate's hand without revealing the strings. Alpharius knew this dance well, every move measured, every word a weapon. Yet the deeper he delved into this game, the more the lines blurred between friend and foe, loyalty and treachery. Among the Imperial ranks, few, suspected the Hydra's true design. But there was one, a trusted commander named Varax, whose instincts prickled with unease. Varax had commanded fleets and forged alliances, but shadows clung to the Alpha Legion's presence like a stain. When intelligence reports began unraveling with suspicious consistency, Varax pieced together a pattern others missed. The Legion's victories, though brilliant, seemed too precise, too convenient. Determined to expose the truth, Varax sought audience with Alfarius himself, threading his way through the labyrinth of secrecy. Their meeting was veiled in polite discourse, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Alfarius welcomed him with a calm smile, a mask perfected over countless years. "You see ghosts where none exist," Alfarius said softly, voice smooth, like silk wrapping steel. "Victory is often mistaken for conspiracy by those unwilling to grasp its complexity." But Varax was not deterred. "Your victories come at a cost beyond the battlefield. I see worlds fractured, lives destroyed, not by war's hand, but by manipulation." The tension between them was a razor's edge. Alfarius regarded Varax with something close to pity, yet beneath it lurked a warning. Continue down this path, and the Legion's wrath would be unleashed. For Alfarius, Varax's challenge was a test, not just of loyalty, but of how far the Legion's shadows could stretch before breaking. Behind closed doors, Omegon observed the growing friction with cold calculation. The Cabal's influence whispered through his veins, promising power beyond the Emperor's grasp. He saw Varax's challenge not as a threat, but an opportunity, a pawn to be turned or crushed depending on need. Within the Legion's ranks, internal struggle mirrored the galaxy's fracturing. Callis, still wrestling with his conscience, found himself caught between the unwavering doctrine Alfarius preached and the seductive visions Omegon embraced. His loyalty was a fragile thread, stretched taut by the weight of lies and half-truths. In the grand tapestry of the Great Crusade, the Alpha Legion's web grew more intricate, ensnaring friend and foe alike. Battles were won with silent strikes and forged orders, alliances shattered from within. Every success deepened the question gnawing at Alfarius's heart. Were they sharpening the Emperor's blade, or slicing the very hand that forged it? As stars flickered and systems trembled, the Hydra's many heads moved ever closer to the heart of the Imperium's truth. And in the silent spaces between wars, the true game unfolded, one where loyalty was currency and betrayal the most potent weapon. The Alpha Legion's strength was not in the masses, but in the many hidden eyes watching, listening, and striking with cold precision. Like a Hydra growing countless heads, their cells operated independently, each a world unto itself, bound only by an unspoken oath to a purpose no one dared fully reveal. Callis, once a steadfast lieutenant, now found himself trapped within this sprawling network of shadows. Each mission pulled him deeper into a labyrinth of half-truths and concealed agendas. He had always believed in the Legion's cause, a necessary force to guide the Imperium through its inevitable storm. But recent whispers, carried on the currents of fear and regret, seeded doubt in his mind. Was the Legion still serving the Emperor's vision, or had they become architects of a far darker future? In the veiled corridors of a conquered star city, Callis met with other Hydra cells, agents who moved like ghosts among the populace, shaping destinies without ever showing their true faces. Here, loyalty was measured in silence, and questions were dangerous currency. Yet even among these shadows, unease stirred. A recent operation had gone awry. An entire planet's populace had been sacrificed to ensure a strategic victory. The cost weighed heavily on Callis. Innocents, lives lost not in open battle, but in the cold calculus of war. He found no comfort in the victories won through such means. Meanwhile, Omegan's dreams grew darker. The Cabal's voices whispered promises of unity forged through fire, of a galaxy reborn from the ashes of old empires. Their ancient knowledge pierced the veil of time, revealing futures where the Emperor's dominion crumbled, replaced by a new order shaped by cunning and ruthlessness. To Omegon, these visions were a path to salvation. Alpharius watched his brother's descent with a growing knot of dread. He understood the seductive power of these promises, but he feared the price. Each new vision chipped away at their shared purpose, driving a wedge between them. Alpharius clung to the hope that deception could be wielded for good, that their lies could protect what was truly worth saving. Within the Legion, the fractures widened. Callus's hesitation became known to some. Whispers of dissent stirred like a storm on the horizon. Alpharius knew that to maintain unity, sacrifices would be necessary, not just on the battlefield, but within their own ranks. The Hydra's brood was both their greatest strength and their most dangerous weakness. As the cells spread, so did the risk of betrayal, of secrets unraveling at the worst possible moment. The twins faced a choice: tighten the web of control or risk losing everything to the chaos they sought to command. And as the stars dimmed and the galaxy trembled beneath the weight of unspoken wars, the Alpha Legion prepared to strike deeper, their true purpose cloaked beneath layers of deception and silent resolve. The Alpha Legion's influence had grown beyond whispered rumors and shadowed strikes. Their operations now spanned entire sectors, threads woven so tightly that the Imperium itself began to strain under the weight. Yet with every calculated deception, the line between salvation and destruction blurred further, until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Alpharius stood on the bridge of the Nemesis Vale, the Legion's stealth cruiser that sailed like a phantom through the void. Below, holographic star charts flickered with the locations of worlds touched by their schemes, planets where loyalty was a mask and allegiance a whispered secret. Each victory was a lie told 1,000 times over, and each lie a seed planted for the future. Callus's doubts had become a quiet rebellion in his heart. The faces of those lost haunted his dreams, innocent lives crushed beneath the tide of unseen wars. He approached Alpharius in the quiet moments before battle, seeking answers that could no longer be found in simple commands. Are we still the Emperor's sword, or have we become the shadow that cuts the hand that wields it? Callus asked, his voice heavy with regret. Alpharius met his gaze, eyes shadowed with the burden of unspoken truths. The sword is only as sharp as the hand that guides it. But sometimes the hand must be hidden, even from itself. Their conversation was cut short by an urgent message. An Imperial fleet was on course to intercept one of their Hydra cells. The fragile balance was tipping, and exposure meant death, not only for the agents, but for the Legion's very existence. As preparations for the operation began, Omegon's presence was absent, lost once again in the shifting currents of the warp. The Cabal's influence whispered promises of power, but Alpharius feared the cost. The visions Omegon pursued might well be traps laid by the unseen architects of ruin. Within the Legion, paranoia grew. Every smile could conceal a dagger, every alliance a potential betrayal. The Hydra's many heads risked severing each other in their blind drive for survival. Alpharius felt the tightening noose of fate, and wondered if their grand design was unraveling from within. A daring strike was launched to save the endangered cell. It was a success marked by silence and swift execution, but the cost was immense. Scores of loyal agents were lost, their deaths erased from history as if they had never been. Alpharius carried their sacrifice in his soul, a reminder that in the game of shadows, even the victors bleed unseen. As the stars flickered and the warp howled beyond the void, Alpharius and Callis shared a moment of rare candor. The question lingered between them. Was their web of lies a fortress or a prison? The answer remained hidden, as elusive as the Hydra itself. Storm clouds gathered over the frontier system of Velcaris, a strategic outpost on the edge of Imperial space, its skies roiling with the promise of conflict. The Alpha Legion's carefully laid plans began to fray as rebellion ignited, not from outside forces, but from within. A mistake, subtle but deadly, rippled through the Hydra cells, threatening to expose the hidden hand behind the unrest. Alpharius stood silently aboard the command vessel, watching the storm break across the planet, Ichi below. The rebellion was both a failure and an opportunity, a wound in the Legion's armor, but also a catalyst for change. His mind churned, weighing the cost of silence against the price of intervention. Omegon, ever drawn to the Cabal's shadowed whispers, argued for decisive action. If we do not burn away the rot, the entire Legion will perish, he said, his eyes gleaming with a cold fire. Sacrifice is necessary. The future demands it. Alpharius hesitated, torn between loyalty to his brother's vision and the lingering hope that the Imperium's core could still be preserved. The two shared a bond forged in fire, yet the gulf between their beliefs widened like a yawning abyss. In the midst of this turmoil, a loyal lieutenant named Velcaris made a choice that would ripple through the shadows. Infiltrating the rebel leadership, she sacrificed everything to salvage the mission, silencing a threat at the cost of her own freedom. Her courage was a beacon in the encroaching darkness, but it also revealed the fragility of the Legion's grip. As the rebellion was quelled, Alpharius found himself wrestling with a growing suspicion. The Cabal's visions might be as deceiving as their own carefully crafted lies. Were they puppets dancing to an alien tune, or masters of their fate? The question gnawed at him, threatening the very foundation of their cause. Back in the depths of the warp, Omegon communed with the ancient intelligences, their whispers weaving a tapestry of futures both terrifying and magnificent. To him, the sacrifice on Velcaris was a necessary step toward a new order, one where the Hydra could finally claim dominion. But Alpharius, watching the dying light of the system, wondered if the cost of such dominion was the destruction of everything they had fought to protect. The galaxy held its breath, caught between fire and shadow, as the Alpha Legion's fate hung on the edge of a knife. The Court of Shadows was no place for light. Hidden in the labyrinthine depths of the nebular expanse, it existed between realities, an enclave where the Imperium's darkest secrets mingled with the whispers of alien powers. Here, behind veils of secrecy, Imperial leaders and enigmatic Xenos emissaries gathered to shape the galaxy's fate far from prying eyes. Alpharius entered the chamber with measured calm, his every step echoing softly against polished stone. The gathered assembly was a swirling mix of human nobility, shadowed agents, and beings whose forms shifted like smoke. Their eyes, some keen, some unknowable, watched the Primarch with a mixture of suspicion and wary respect. The gravity of the moment was unmistakable. Rumors of the impending Horus heresy had begun to seep through the cracks of the Imperium's facade, and the Alpha Legion's loyalties were under scrutiny from all sides. Here, alliances were fragile, forged in silence and maintained by mutual fear. Omegon appeared beside Alpharius, his presence a shadow to his. Brothers light, their eyes met, a silent battle waged in that glance. Alfarius saw the resolve etched into Omegan's features, the certainty that their path lay beyond the Emperor's grasp. Omegan's vision of the future was one where old orders fell, replaced by a new dominion shaped by cunning and control. Amid the murmur of the court, an assassin struck, swift and unseen. The attempt on Alfarius's life shattered the fragile peace, sending ripples of paranoia through the assembly. Who among them sought to unravel the Hydra from within? The question hung heavy, the answer obscured by layers of deception. In the days that followed, Alfarius and Omegan retreated to the Legion's sanctum, their private war intensifying. Each suspected the other's silence concealed dangerous truths. Omegon's allegiance to the Cabal deepened, his dreams haunted by visions of a galaxy reshaped through fire and subterfuge. Alfarius grappled with doubt, clinging to the hope that their ultimate loyalty remained with the Emperor, even as their methods diverged. Within the court's shadows, whispers spread of betrayal, of shifting loyalties, of a legion teetering on the edge of fracture. The Alpha Legion was no longer merely a weapon. It was a living enigma, a puzzle whose pieces threatened to tear themselves apart. As stars burned cold outside the chamber's protective wards, the twins faced a truth more terrifying than any enemy. The greatest threat to their cause was the widening gulf between them, and in the court of shadows, every secret told was a blade waiting to strike. The galaxy held its breath as the Hydra turned, its many heads striking with calculated precision and silent fury. The Alpha Legion's campaign had shifted from subtle manipulation to bold confrontation. Yet beneath the surface of their operations, the fractures within the Legion deepened, threatening to tear it asunder from within. Alfarius moved like a shadow through the corridors of a captured fortress on the world of Relthar, his mind a storm of conflicting loyalties. The rebellion that had sparked there was crushed swiftly, but the price was high, not only in lives lost, but in trust shattered. Allies once certain now cast doubtful glances, and whispers of treachery echoed like poison through the halls. Omegon's influence grew stronger, his connection to the Cabal weaving a web that pulled the Legion toward a destiny neither could fully comprehend. He believed that sacrifice and subversion were necessary to forge a new order, one beyond the Emperor's rigid vision. Alfarius, however, feared the abyss that awaited if they lost themselves in the darkness. Callous, caught in the maelstrom, wrestled with his fractured faith. His heart ached for the ideals he once held, yet the reality of the Legion's methods pressed down like a suffocating weight. He confronted Alfarius beneath the dying light of a blood-red sun, seeking answers that might salvage his broken loyalty. "Is this still the Legion I swore to serve?" Callus demanded, voice trembling with desperation. "Or have we become the architects of our own destruction?" Alfarius met his gaze with a sorrow that mirrored his own doubts. "We are the Hydra, Callus. To lose a head is to lose nothing. But if the body forgets its purpose, then we all perish." Meanwhile, unseen enemies watched from the shadows. Agents loyal to Horus, the War Master whose betrayal loomed like a gathering storm, sought to exploit the Legion's fractures. The seeds of the heresy took root in whispered conspiracies and secret pacts, tightening around the Imperium like a noose. In a desperate gamble, Omegon proposed a daring strike into the heart of Imperial power, a bold move that could either secure their place or shatter the fragile peace. Alfarius hesitated, torn between the promise of decisive action and the fear of irreversible consequences. As the stars aligned for this fateful moment, the Hydra's many heads prepared to strike. Yet beneath their calculated maneuvers lay the question that would shape their fate. Could a legion born of lies survive the truth? The fracture had been inevitable. Like a wound long ignored, it festered beneath the surface of the Alpha Legion, growing wider with each whispered secret and shadowed betrayal. The bond between Alfarius and Omegon, once thought unbreakable, strained under the weight of conflicting visions and the looming storm of the Horus heresy. Alfarius moved through the Legion's warship veil of whispers like a ghost, his steps echoing in the hollow corridors. Every decision now felt like a betrayal, every order a thread pulling taut the fragile web of loyalty that held them together. His mind was a battlefield where duty clashed with doubt, and the faces of lost comrades haunted his every thought. Omegon, meanwhile, had become a figure shrouded in mystery and darkness. His connection to the Cabal deepened, their alien whispers guiding him toward a future that rejected the Emperor's dominion. To Omegon, loyalty was a chain meant to be broken, a past to be discarded in the fire of rebirth. Callis, caught between these titans of faith and doubt, wrestled with his own conscience. He had seen friends fall to suspicion, watched as loyalty twisted into paranoia. The Hydra was no longer a symbol of unity, but a fractured beast tearing itself apart from within. The Legion's operatives found themselves forced into impossible choices. Allies became enemies overnight, and trust was a commodity too costly to afford. Each mission carried the weight of unseen eyes and whispered threats. In the shadows, the seeds of betrayal took root, watered by fear and desperation. A critical operation in the sector of Thalros became the crucible for these tensions. Orders arrived that contradicted previous directives, leaving commanders bewildered and divided. Callis confronted Alfarius in a rare moment of vulnerability, seeking clarity amid the chaos. Are we still the Emperor's will, or have we become the architects of ruin? He asked, voice heavy with anguish. Alfarius's reply was somber, filled with the burden of a leader torn between salvation and damnation. We walk a razor's edge, Callis. One misstep, and we fall into the abyss. But sometimes, to save the whole, parts must be sacrificed. As the heresy's shadow spread, the Alpha Legion faced its greatest trial, not on the battlefield, but within the fractured loyalties of its own soul. And in that fracture lay the seed of the Empire's fall. The reverberations of betrayal echoed through the halls of the Alpha Legion like distant thunder, growing louder with each passing day. The fractures once hidden beneath layers of deception now threatened to rupture the very core of the Legion's purpose. Shadows deepened, and trust became a fragile illusion. Alfarius moved through the Legion's labyrinthine fortress world, his gaze heavy with the weight of choices made and paths forsaken. Every corner whispered secrets, every silence spoke of dangers unseen. The spectre of betrayal haunted his steps, for in a legion built on lies, the greatest threat was the truth. Omegon's absence grew longer, swallowed by the warp's endless currents as he pursued the Cabal's inscrutable designs. His visions painted a future of fire and renewal, yet each step away from the Legion pulled him deeper into isolation. Alfarius feared that in seeking to save their cause, Omegon might doom them all. Within the ranks, suspicion spiraled into open conflict. Callis, once a beacon of loyalty, now stood at a crossroads, torn between duty and conscience. He confronted a fellow officer accused of treachery, their confrontation a painful mirror of the Legion's internal war. The Imperium outside trembled as the Horus heresy erupted in full fury. Allies turned to enemies, and the galaxy itself seemed poised on the brink of collapse. The Alpha Legion's true nature was revealed, not as conquerors, but as survivors in a game where betrayal was both shield and sword. A critical intelligence leak fractured a key operation, forcing the Legion to retreat from a vital system. The loss was a blow to Alpharius's carefully laid plans, but also a grim reminder of the cost of divided loyalties. The Hydra's many heads found themselves biting each other, weakening the whole. In a rare moment of reflection, Alpharius pondered the cost of their ambition. Was the empire they sought to build worth the destruction sown within their own ranks? The question haunted him, a silent echo in the void. The final threads of trust unraveled as the Legion prepared for the coming storm. In a universe where betrayal was currency, only the most cunning could hope to survive. The galaxy teetered on the brink, caught in the maelstrom of the Horus heresy, as the Alpha Legion faced its final gambit. The intricate web they had woven across star systems now threatened to unravel in a single, devastating move. Alpharius stood at the crossroads of destiny, the weight of countless lives pressing down like the crushing void. Omegon remained distant, his mind lost in the Cabal's endless whispers. Their alien council urged him toward a reckoning, a final cleansing fire that would reshape the stars themselves. To him, sacrifice was not loss, but transformation, a necessary agony for rebirth. Alpharius, however, clung to the remnants of hope that the Legion could still serve a greater purpose. He gathered the loyal few, those whose hearts had not been broken by doubt or betrayal, to enact a plan as bold as it was desperate. It was a gambit to reclaim their honor or to ensure their survival if all else failed. Callous, torn by the Legion's fracturing soul, stood beside Alpharius, his resolve hardened by the sacrifices he had witnessed. The ghosts of fallen comrades whispered in his mind, urging him forward even as his heart fractured beneath the weight of their loss. The plan was simple in its cruelty, a coordinated strike deep into the enemy's heart, aimed at severing the head of the rebellion before it could spread further. The operation required flawless execution, trust among fractured allies, and the willingness to sacrifice everything. As the Alpha Legion's forces moved through the void, shadows lengthened across the stars. Battles raged not just in the cold expanse of space, but in whispered councils and secret betrayals. Every decision echoed with the possibility of ruin. The strike unfolded with ruthless precision, the Hydra's many heads striking simultaneously across multiple fronts. Yet even in victory, the cost was unbearable. Allies were lost, secrets betrayed, and the fragile trust between Alpharius and Omegon shattered beyond repair. In the aftermath, Alpharius stood amid the ruins of their victory, a solitary figure surrounded by silence. The price of their ambition lay heavy upon him. The knowledge that some gambits, no matter how well played, demand the ultimate sacrifice. As the stars flickered and the horizon darkened, the Alpha Legion faced the dawning realization. Their war was far from over, and the greatest betrayal was yet to come. The bond between Alpharius and Omegon, once unbreakable as the stars themselves, now lay shattered beneath the weight of betrayals and unspoken truths. The fractures carved deep wounds into the Alpha Legion's soul, threatening to rend it apart and cast its remnants into oblivion. Alpharius stood alone in the desolate command chamber of the Veil of Whispers, the silence around him a stark contrast to the storm raging within. Memories of battles fought and brothers lost haunted his thoughts, each a shard of a past that seemed more distant with every passing moment. The path they had chosen, paved with deception and sacrifice, now bore the bitter fruit of division. Omegon's absence was a void felt keenly in the Legion's every movement, lost in the warp's labyrinthine depths, consumed by the Cabal's cryptic visions. He drifted further from the man Alpharius once knew. The warmth of brotherhood was replaced by cold calculation, a relentless drive toward a future only he could see. Within the Legion, loyalties fractured as cells turned inward, suspicion breeding paranoia. Callus, caught between two shattered halves, sought to hold the remnants together, but even his resolve wavered under the relentless pressure. The true test came when Omegan returned, not as the brother Alpharius had hoped for, but as a harbinger of ruin. His eyes, once familiar, now held the cold fire of fanaticism. The Cabal's whispers had become commands, their alien agenda overriding all else. A confrontation was inevitable. In the war-torn ruins of the system Elestria, beneath skies torn by fire and smoke, Alpharius faced Omegan one last time. Words were weapons, truths were lies, and the bond of blood was tested against the relentless tide of ambition. "Brother," Alpharius pleaded, voice heavy with sorrow, "remember who we were. Remember why we fought." Omegon's reply was a dagger wrapped in velvet. "I remember only the future we must forge, one where the weak fall and the cunning survive." Steel clashed as the Hydra's heads turned on themselves, brother against brother, in a tragic dance of fate. The battle was swift and brutal, leaving scars that would never heal. As the dust settled, Alpharius was left with the bitter knowledge that some bonds, no matter how sacred, can be broken beyond repair. The Legion's fate hung in the balance, a fragile hope amid the ruins of shattered trust. The stars themselves seemed to mourn as the Alpha Legion faced its darkest hour, the hour when brotherhood died and only the serpent remained. The Hydra's fall was not marked by the roar of cannon fire or the blaze of starfire. It was a quiet unraveling, a slow decay from within that no enemy could claim, but the very ghosts of betrayal and ambition that haunted the Alpha Legion's heart. Alpharius stood amid the ruins of their last stronghold, the once proud bastion, now scarred by battles both seen and hidden. Around him, silence stretched like a shroud, broken only by the distant echoes of a galaxy tearing itself apart. The war outside was a storm, but here, within the Legion, the tempest was of the soul. Callus moved through the shattered ranks, his steps heavy with grief and regret. He had once believed in the Legion's cause, in the promise of a new order forged through cunning and sacrifice. But now, the cost was written in the blood of friends turned foes, in the fractured dreams that lay in ruin. Omegan's fate remained a whispered secret, lost somewhere in the warp's endless expanse. His vision of rebirth had become a nightmare, one that consumed all that they had fought to protect. Alpharius carried the weight of that loss, a burden heavier than any warship or legion. The Imperium's forces pressed closer, their relentless advance a reminder that time was no ally. The Hydra's many heads had fallen silent, severed by the knives of betrayal and the slow poison of doubt. What remained was a hollow echo of power, a shadow fleeing before the dawn. In the final moments, Alpharius made a choice, not of conquest, but of survival. The Legion would fade into legend, a ghost fleet scattering like mist across the stars, their true purpose hidden in the dark. The empire they had sought to build was lost, but their secrets would endure. As dying suns flickered and the galaxy's night deepened, the fall of the Hydra was complete, not with a blaze, but with a whisper. A cautionary tale of ambition's cost, of loyalty shattered, and of empires born only to crumble beneath their own weight. The last echo of the Alpha Legion faded, not with thunder or fury, but as a whisper carried on the cosmic winds, an ancient song of glory, betrayal, and inevitable decay. The Hydra's many heads, once poised to seize the stars, now lay broken and scattered across the void, their secrets buried beneath layers of silence and forgotten time. Alfarius, the solitary sentinel of a fallen dream, drifted through the remnants of what had been. His mind was a tempest of memories, of battles waged in the shadowed corners of the galaxy, of brothers lost and promises broken. Immortality, once a gift, now felt a cruel curse. To live beyond empires, beyond time itself, was to bear witness to endless cycles of rise and ruin. The stars, cold and indifferent, bore no witness to his solitude. The great designs that had once driven the Hydra now seemed like fragile illusions, undone by the very ambitions they had set in motion. Alfarius pondered the cost. How many had fallen for the sake of a lie? How many dreams had turned to ash beneath the weight of deceit? In the distant warp, Omegon's fate remained a mystery, a shadow lost to the endless currents of time. Whether consumed by the Cabal or transformed into something unrecognizable, his absence was a wound that would never heal. As the galaxy turned, new empires rose and old stars flickered out. The legacy of the Alpha Legion became a caution, whispered among those who dare grasp for power. Their story, a tragic tale of loyalty twisted into betrayal, of ambition that outpaced wisdom, and of the cruel price of immortality. Alfarius's final thoughts lingered on the fragile nature of hope. Perhaps, in the silence that follows the fall, there was space for redemption, a chance for the universe to learn from the shadows of the past. And so, beneath dying suns and among crumbling ruins, the last echo faded, leaving behind only questions and the weight of a story told too late.